Hello and welcome to the 7th episode
Yes.
of Creation of Anatomy. And I'm your host, Eric Valero.
And I'm Sarah Holcraft.
And I want to start off tonight about gardening. Because why not, right?
I mean, it is applicable to the topic also.
It is, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the idea of letting growth just happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how's your garden growing?
Well, it's been a tumultuous month of gardening.
What a word.
I mean, don't you think?
It has been.
Like June into July, you have your garden and I have my garden, and we have the garden at St. Francis, plus your other gardens.
Yep.
It's a lot going on, and it's very emotional.
Especially when the groundhog.
I know. I was thinking, for you, it's been much more of a roller coaster.
Yeah.
A lot of experiences.
I don't know. I feel like groundhogs. Did God make a mistake? Because they really know how to destroy something beautiful.
But we need them, because how else would we know when spring's going to come?
And we need their fur, when we take them out,
And they're cute.
Oh, yeah, that one that was stuck under the car that one time. That was cute. Yeah, well, I had a garden over at Our Lady of Mount Carmel. It was perfectly fine. The whole garden was there. It had string beans and cucumbers and pumpkins, carrots, spinach, and just destroyed.
I think it's good for you to talk about this.
It is. It's cathartic.
Yeah.
Get my emotions out about the groundhogs. They really get me riled up,
But the cucumbers came back, didn't they? No?
No.
When we went back there, they were still alive.
Yeah.
Oh, they're dead now. Okay, well, it happens. Gardens aren't forever.
Yeah, no. The grapes are growing great, though. Oh my goodness, I have so many grapes.
I'm ready.
Almost. No, they're close though.
I'm excited.
No, but you had a bit of a emotional situation with your garden.
So it's funny because last summer I'd never been into gardening, never been very good with plants in general. I love the look of them, but I just didn't feel like I was very good at it. And last summer, 2 summers ago, I started a compost bin. Not really for anything except that we had a lot of compost, and I thought, why not? And then last summer, I was putting some of the compost into the soil next to it, and all of a sudden, a plant starts emerging. And then a few weeks later, we have tomatoes. And I was like, oh my goodness. My roommate and I were so excited. So this summer, I was like, for sure, I'm going to plant tomatoes again. But then meeting you and you being into gardening, I was like, I'm going to get into it. And so we had tomatoes. We planted tomatoes on purpose this year.
Yeah.
We also planted on purpose
Probably
strawberries.
Not the quantity of tomatoes.
No, I didn't realize that each tomato seed would grow its own plant.
Pretty successfully, without fail, they all grew.
Yeah. So that was oh well. But
your potatoes are great.
Oh yes, I grew potatoes. Those were the first thing that started sprouting that I was in love with. And then the accidental squash seeds, which we thought were pumpkins for a while, and then they weren't flowering.
Oh, that's like 10 feet long now.
Oh my goodness.
And with like 2 little, what do you think they are? Butternut squashes, probably?
I guess
yeah,
so.
they look like baby butternut squashes.
So all very, very
Which would
exciting.
make sense because somebody cuts open a butternut squash, they're going to throw the seeds away.
Yeah. And she's a squash person. She's a squash girl, so.
Total squash girl.
Yeah. But alas, my garden, we have to leave. And it's hard. Well, to be honest, moving in general is always a very stressful time and emotional time. But I didn't realize how excited I was seeing my garden grow. And I mean, there's something comforting to know in my heart that it's going to continue to grow. Because to be honest, like New Jersey, it's been raining so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not really concerned about like
Watering it, taking care of it.
I
No, it
think it'll just
takes care of
go.
itself.
It'll go. It'll
Mm-hmm.
keep climbing up the tree and growing its cucumbers and
Oh yeah.
yeah.
There'll be some big spaghetti squashes or
I
whatever kind of
know.
squashes they are.
We are taking the watermelon though.
Oh yeah.
Little baby watermelon.
That
So
was
cute.
cute. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you want to explain why we have a Christmas tree here too?
On the plant theme, this is a fake tree that we did not grow.
We did not.
No.
A different plastic farmer grew this.
Yeah, as they do.
But
we're
it's
still in July. We just celebrated 4th of July, so it's fitting.
Christmas in July.
Christmas in July.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my family and I, we just started our Secret Santa, so we're in the mood.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. On this hot, hot day.
Oh, it is a hot day. So, what'd you think of the reading? Oh, for those that are reading along with us, today we read from 36 all the way to page 44, which is Bacon, Descartes, and New Subjectivity. So it's kind of a little bit of a continuation of the philosophical discussion about Kant and, you know, the ideas that Pope John Paul II took,
inspired by.
Yep, and incorporated into his theology of the body. So, do you have any thoughts to start us off?
Yeah, my initial thought just in general about the reading is that I am starting to recognize how familiar I am with JP2 because every time we read something of his, it makes sense to me and I understand it very quickly. But today we were reading a lot from other writers and thinkers, and it took a lot more brain power for me this time to follow along and to understand what they were saying because I'm just not familiar with their work so much.
Right.
But it is very clear in the context of theology of the body what it is all trying to say. And I like a lot of what is being talked about in when they're talking about the Bacon Project, which I don't really know what they mean by Bacon Project. Like I know who Francis Bacon is.
The Baconian Project, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know what his project is.
Where was that? They're talking about that. Yeah.
I mean,
the program, yeah.
Yeah. It's I understand that it has something to do with power and the understanding of power and people's ambitions. But I'm just not so familiar with his work on it. Maybe this is a good summary of it and I don't need to read more, but
yeah. Well, I mean, this is a really great, if I want to just kind of read this little passage right here, there's a really good explanation of what the page 39. Okay. At the height of its triumph in the 20th century, as Hans Jonas argues, the Baconian program has revealed its insufficiency in the lack of control over itself. Both humanity and the earth now need protection because of the very magnitude of the power that has been achieved, for example, nuclear weapons. Yet we do not seem able to offer such protection. Scientific and technological progress has its own dynamics in which power that can be used will be used. Bacon did not anticipate this deep paradox of the power derived from knowledge, that it leads indeed to some sort of domination over nature, but at the same time to a helpless subjugation under itself. Now, this is interesting because it's kind of they go deeper into the Baconian program and some of the ideas of I guess, the endeavors that science has in this is the theme that I think we brought up in a lot of um, the podcast so far, which is the idea of trying to have some kind of complete um, model of reality, right? Like the idea that biology's finished, right? That we figured out everything. And I'm not sure if we brought this up on a podcast or not, but we were definitely talking about it based off of a book I was reading about how prior to Albert Einstein, right, they pretty much thought they had physics wrapped up, right? Like they really thought that all of Newtonian physics kind of was explain the world, right? Like everything could be explained through Newtonian physics, and that one of the bigger problems that were still left over was the idea um, of how light travels at the same speed, and they couldn't figure it out why, like the Earth traveling alongside light, and why if the Earth plus the speed of light, it doesn't change, right? It doesn't matter. It still has a speed limit, right? And Einstein, kind of in his endeavor to figure that out, broke open so much more physics, right? That still needs to be understood. And this kind of idea, I think, that, well, he was even talking about when he says, oh, sorry, I flipped 2 pages, that it leads indeed to some sort of domination over nature, right? The idea that you figured out how reality works, and now you have this little algorithm or some formula that can just tell you what's going to predict what's going to happen, right? And we don't, right? And like I think Einstein is the perfect example of that. Of he broke down the Tower of Babel. That was physics, right? Physics thought that they had the key to heaven, right? And then he broke it down and was like, hey, look, guys, we have to be a little more humble than this. There's a lot more out there.
Yeah. This is why it's kind of fun gardening with you, actually, because you are a scientist, and still, like, we can know a lot about gardening, we can know a lot about plants, but still, like, unpredictable things happen. Like, why does this plant choose to go in this way?
Yeah.
And why are certain soils, like, working while others aren't? Or why are certain plants liking, like, they want to be near these plants but not these plants? Like, it's like we can just continue to study and study and study, and still, like, sometimes they'll do things that,
like the vines,
yeah,
like the little curly cues that the pumpkin plants make.
Yeah.
Because Charles Darwin, like, figured out, or what seemed to figure out, how they work in kind of a deterministic manner. Because people thought that they had like some kind of spirit to them. They had something guiding them, right?
Yeah.
But there's something more fundamental guiding them. If you think about it, is that, like, through natural selection, through there being a creator that made it in this way so that it was possible for a plant to kind of just do this on its own, is that it's still, like, now it's totally unexpected. I mean, there weren't fences when pumpkins evolved, right? But my pumpkins seem to be able to climb the fence,
right? Yeah.
Right? And how something that was designed for a purpose has the ability to modify a little bit and change to a new purpose it's just so wonderful, and it really gives you it's a humbling feeling of man, the point isn't to be God and figure it all out.
Right, yeah.
The point is to be enamored by God.
Yeah.
By how amazing it is, and how, like, I'll never know every little bit, but why would I want to know every little bit?
Yeah. But it does also bring up a good point. Like, there is a reason to all of it. Like, it's not just random that they do things. Versus, like, I like this, might be skipping ahead a little bit, but on page 41, it says, a free will is in itself the noblest thing we can have. because it makes us in a certain manner equal to God and exempts us from being his subjects. And so its rightful use is the greatest of all the goods we possess. And further, there is nothing that is more our own or that matters more to us. And I've just never heard free will talked about like in that way, because I guess like a lot of times when I hear it, the idea of free will, it's kind of like people's reason for like why bad things happen in the world, which sure is true. But and it almost makes it seem like free will is a negative thing. Like bad things happen because of free will, bad free will. Like they seem to go hand in hand. And to hear like that, that free will is like there's nothing more that is ours. There's nothing more that like God gave us that, I don't know, makes us different than all of his other creation. Like,
it's so obvious that that's the case too.
Yeah.
You know, like no one can really, I think people go like, oh, well, humans are quite like impressed with themselves and they think that they're the greatest thing on earth. But it is true is that like you don't see anything even remotely close to the type of free will humans have. You know, like you look at chimpanzees and bonobos and some of the greater apes and like,
what's a bonobo? Bonobo?
Oh, they're very similar to a chimpanzee. They're a little smaller.
Oh, okay.
They're a lot more peaceful, kind of. They call them like the hippie apes. But if you look at them, is that, you know, I was watching a documentary on them last night, and you know, it's interesting to watch them because they have an element of what looks like free will, right? But it's not like, I think they were trying to make the documentary inappropriately into a bit of a human, like anthropocentric story, right? This love story that this one female bonobo was going and like found this nice looking boy and followed him home.
As she should.
Right? But it wasn't, it's not choice like we have.
Yeah.
You know? Were you just telling me about this? About, I think it's C.S. Lewis. I wasn't sure if you said this or not. I don't know why I thought you said it, but said something about, is it C.S. Lewis? I'm not sure, but free will exists between, or maybe it's meaning in life between stimulus and response. No, it was the woman I was just talking to about. Oh, I wish I knew her name now. The one that did the book, The Tiny Experiments.
Oh,
that's who said it. Yes, and I don't know who she was talking about, but that's about the idea of free will. Is that a lot of animals, you can kind of predict a lot of their behaviors, if you knew the stimuli that was coming in and the type of responses they'd have.
Right.
I mean, they do have processing, right?
Yeah.
But you can't chalk up free will to processing.
Yeah.
You know, because then it's just like one neuron fires to the next, and there's a what is your meaning in life, the fact that you have a second set of neurons prior to the sensory neurons versus the motor neurons of the output. It's like that's not very meaningful, you know, and it just kind of seems like it's slightly more complicated, not necessarily something that you're choosing, but it's just a little bit not as obvious, right? Versus like if you had like certain animals like sponges, right, don't have something called interneurons, right? And they actually don't even call them sensory and motor neurons. They call them, I think they call them sensory, but then they just call them effectors.
Okay.
Right? Is that it's just kind of like it's when stimulus A comes in, effect A goes out.
Yeah.
And when stimulus B comes in, effect B goes out.
Right, yeah,
right?
like equation.
Yeah, and it just helps it survive, right?
Yeah.
That might mean like, I don't know, tighten up the pores or loosen up, whatever it means, right?
Yeah.
But as brains got more complicated through evolution, there was more gaps. Like you think a worm is a pretty good example of something that has a very simplistic like proto brain, right? Where it has sensory, and then there's a little bit of processing, and then it can respond, right? And now we have a very, very complicated system, but there is still this element of like, what is free choice?
Yeah.
Right? And the fact that we can predict the future or attempt to predict the future is something that is like kind of unbelievable, because you see some animals that seem to predict the future. You know, squirrels hide their nuts, right? And you might go, why are they hiding their nuts? And you might go, oh, because they're thinking of a time in December when it's cold, and they're going to be, isn't it nice that I have these nuts saved? That's not true. They just randomly evolved a behavior to bury nuts, and the ones that did that survived, and they have no clue why they're burying the nuts. It's just a behavior that kind of evolved, and they don't see the future. You know what I mean? Right? So like, I wonder if all the way up the animal kingdom to before us, because okay, so this is a good example because Franz de Waal, I'm reading that book that he.
Wait, so you're saying that like as humans, we have an ability to like look into the future and make decisions?
That seems to be what is the primary difference between humans and, because I mean humans are the only organisms aware of their own mortality, right? Humans are also the only organisms truly aware of the consequence of sexual intercourse. And this is kind of what Franz de Waal was talking about in his book, is that it's really interesting when you because he was saying, he was talking about inappropriate or anthropomorphizations, anthropocentric like characteristics that the narrator will put on some of the animals. Is that he talks about, I think he was talking about zebras specifically, but he was saying, you'll hear a narrator go, these two males are like competing to be able to mate with this female so that they can pass their genetics on to the next generation. Then he goes, no, they're not. They have no clue of trying to keep their lineage alive, or that what they're about to do is even going to result in another organism, right? That it's going to be their offspring. They are competing to mount the female zebra. That's all they want to do. And like, then comes along behaviors of, well, you know, being able to recognize kin, right? Being able to recognize a relative, right? And being altruistic towards that. But there isn't that connection that humans have.
It's just like present moment. What am I supposed to do to survive?
Somebody that has never seen their child, didn't even know they had a child. A woman can go up to that man and go, you have a son. And immediately they will go, I did something however long ago that caused that event to occur, right? That caused that person to now exist in this world. And it seems like that's a big aspect of free will, is the fact that, I mean, you don't have to know much about biological sexual reproduction to understand that the act that you were involved in is necessary in order for that to happen. And you don't need to know all of the interworkings, and we will never actually know. I mean, I've studied embryology for a few years now, and I'm not feeling much closer to some kind of like complete understanding of how that all works, and we're not in any way about to be in that either.
Yeah.
So and it's kind of funny because I feel like I'm going on a long time about this, but a
What
really
page?
interesting sentence on page 40, and I wrote two things about this, and it goes a lot about primatology, is the result can be simply put, right? Knowledge permitting prediction and some control over biological events has been purchased at the cost of deep ignorance, not to say misunderstanding of living beings, ourselves included. And the two things I wrote there was birth control
Mm-hmm.
and concealed ovulation.
Mm-hmm.
Birth control is obvious, right? Is that, well, first off, we would never, without free will or the ability to see the future, came up with birth control, right? Because, well, first off, it's evolutionarily absurd, birth
Mm-hmm.
control. Like in the Richard Dawkins idea of genes that are trying to just get passed along, right? Why would we ever do anything that would hinder our ability to pass our genes on,
Yeah.
right? Um, and he has an explanation for that, which is pretty decent, right? But concealed ovulation, do you know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
So for the people that don't understand what concealed ovulation is, that's um, something that's, I'm not sure if it's completely isolated to just humans, but all other animals flaunt that they're ovulating, right? They flaunt it. They'll scream it into the forest, or they will have like very obvious bodily changes
Mm-hmm.
that make it incredibly obvious that they're ovulating. But humans have concealed ovulation where it's not obvious. And it's really strange that we evolved that way. And one of the ideas is that we've evolved that way so that there is a necessity for males to, like, it's one of the ideas of it promoted more male involvement in rearing a
Mm-hmm.
child because um, of the unknown factor of if they only had to have sexual intercourse on days that they were ovulating,
Mm-hmm.
it would mean that they could kind of hoard their resources for a long time and then just be very, I don't know, charming and generous
Mm-hmm.
a couple days before ovulation, and then they can hoard their resources again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of interesting is that I think this goes into this entire book, and we're probably tapping into something that is relevant to this. But when he says that purchased at the cost of deep ignorance, is that we don't know what kind of fire we're playing with in in any of those things. You know,
Mm-hmm.
in birth control. That, I mean, you see there's a lot of issues that come along with hormonal contraception, right?
Yeah.
And there is this idea of an arrogance to think that, wow, we realized that we could do something,
Yeah.
but ought we do it? You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
don't know the answer. I'm not putting any kind of judgment on any of that. But it very much is like we found fire and now we burn down the village.
Yeah.
You know?
It's interesting that you're thinking of it so broad because when I read that, I was thinking of it like in the day to day, like knowledge permitting prediction and control over biological events has been purchased at the cost of deep ignorance. And I felt that resonate with me on like a personal level of like when we assume that we know somebody,
hmm
we stop there and think that we can
Oh.
predict what they're going to do, predict what they're going to say, and we start to become ignorant of the fact that they change and that
Mm.
they grow and that we ourselves are changing and growing and that we should be
Hmm.
mindful of how a relationship wants to develop, but if we're not willing to see it develop, then it won't.
Right.
and and I think that's why people in general like have a hard time with entering into relationships because there's a lot of unpredictability and it's really easy to see somebody and label them and know how to, and we've talked about this so much, like you like to use this idea of like people having flashcards that they use in certain instances with certain people. And I think that like sometimes we, like even we do that, especially when we're just meeting somebody. Like we know that it's polite and appropriate to say, how are you? And to ask about their job or their family. But we need to like eventually go beyond that.
Right.
Which is scary because it gives up our knowledge that we have, and it means that we have to enter into a place of unknown.
Yeah.
And
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people maybe in a short term wish that somebody that they meet could be very predictable. Yeah. And to be honest, I think it's why people conform a lot of times, is that being a very unique person is makes it difficult for other people to interact with you. Yeah. And that's not to say a bad thing. Like there's nothing wrong with that, actually. I actually think that's quite a good thing to be able to express your uniqueness. But it does make you very difficult to interact with, versus if you are somebody that, like, let's say that you're a movie director, right? And I'm sure you've met a lot of people coming in for, like, let's say you're a casting director and you're trying to cast somebody. I'm sure you get the types, right? And then you know how to treat the person because you see that this is a desperate type, this is a like overconfident, whatever it is, right? Entitled, and you just treat them like every other person that fit into that type. And the way that I think about it is, and I think going back to a very biological standpoint on this, is that fundamentally the box you put somebody in, when and I think you need to put people in boxes, but they need to be movable boxes, right? I'm not going to go like, I have no clue what I'm looking at right now. This is an amorphous person, you put people in boxes. Like I meet somebody, I put them in, are you a male or you are a female, right? And when you put that it eases some anxiety of, all right, well, here's now sets of behaviors that are appropriate here, sets of behaviors that are appropriate here, take those out, I'm in this box here, right? And then they go, oh, I'm a lawyer, and you're like, oh, cool, like lawyer box, right? And then they start telling you more things about them, and you are I think you're in an attempt to be respectful and in an attempt to make the person comfortable and maybe to like you or whatever it is that you try to figure out, like, you put the person in their box as opposed to a box, right? They're not like, I treat them exactly as all female lawyers and boom, right? That's who this person is. You're not allowed to be anything more unique than female lawyer. It's unique enough already.
Yeah, and it's hard because people themselves want to be put in a box. And I actually was having like a conversation with a high schooler last week who was asking me to give her advice about a friendship that she had and to like pray for her friend. And she started it off like talking a lot about how, I think she was nervous to say this because she didn't want to be insensitive. She was basically telling me like she knows her friend deals with anxiety and has mental health problems, and so because of that she wants to take care of her. But I think like she's gotten to the point where she is realizing that like her friend isn't caring for her in any way. And I think when we put ourselves in boxes sometimes, like, it allows us to have excuses. And I think to be somebody who like just struggles with their mental health, like, for one, for us to just put somebody in that box and to expect certain choices that they're going to make or decisions that they're going to make because of that is unfair for us to do. But then on the flip side, like to put ourselves in a box and say, well, because of this, I don't have to do this, or this is what you should expect of me, is unfair to others. And I think going back to free will, like it's really important that we acknowledge that we have free will and that other people have free will.
Yeah.
Because then we know that despite all the factors in our life, despite everything that we've gone through, or all the people that we know and people who have changed us, whatever, like we still in this moment have the ability to make a radical decision.
Yeah.
And
take that person out of the box.
Right.
Radically take them out of a box.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's almost funny, like, that I hear so many people say, like, oh, why do we have to have free will? It'd be like so much easier if we didn't have free will and we just always made good decisions. And but I think
I don't even know what that would be like.
Yeah, like JP2 is going to get into, I think like that's, you can't have love without free will. And
people don't know what they're wishing for sometimes.
Right, which even goes into later. I really like the section later on page 41. Mm-hmm. The quote that says, love consists of a commitment which limits one's freedom. It is a giving of the self, and to give oneself means just that, to limit one's freedom on behalf of another. Limitation of one's freedom might seem to be something negative and unpleasant, but love makes it a positive, joyful, and creative thing. Freedom exists for the sake of love. Man longs for love more than for freedom. Freedom is the means and love the end. And I actually, when we read that first sentence at first, I was like, I almost felt a little angst towards it, because I think,
really,
yeah, I think I would never want to tell you, like, man, I loved being single, because it almost makes it seem like I preferred my freedom and that I had to give up some freedom to be with you. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't want to say that to you, but it is true. Like, mm-hmm. I did give up some freedom to be in a relationship, and like my single life was really good in a lot of ways for a lot of different reasons. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, like, when we finished the quote, I was like, okay, that makes me feel better, because what it says, limitation of one's freedom might seem to be something negative and unpleasant. Love makes it a positive, joyful, and creative thing. Like, yeah, I do feel my freedom limited, but it is so that I can love somebody. Like, it's my freedom has found a purpose.
That's so funny you say that, and especially the aspect of the creative thing, right?
Yes.
Because I wrote earlier on, because when he talks about, I believe it was a critique on the Aristotelian idea of the teleology of there must be some type of end everything's marching towards, which is a perfectly predictive model, right? Which is just not reality.
Yeah.
He talks about, and I even said it was sounds like a big insult here, but he was talking about how the principles of the Greeks are like boyhood of knowledge, and has the characteristic property of boys. And now boys, very specifically boys, right? Little boys. It can talk, but it cannot generate. Mm-hmm. For it is fruitful of controversies, but barren of works. And I wrote on the sides, meme replication. Mm-hmm. Because I'm thinking, as far as good ideas go, right, they can replicate, and depending on how much it replicates is how good of an idea. You could judge it by its fruits, right? But think about it this way. As creative in the idea of, like, having children, right? Being in that creative way of love being creative, is that the way of looking at it in that way is like a boy who, if you, like a Peter Pan kind of boy who stays a boy all of his life, is that he's free, right? He's free to do whatever he wants, right? But you can't participate in the trueness of creation until you give up your bachelor ways and sacrifice some of your freedom for love, and then start a family and have children and be creative in that way. Is that I think that's the most I think that's we have no concept of how that is the greatest creativity a human being could possibly have, is being able to have a child. It's the greatest creativity. I don't care the Mona Lisa or the Statue of David, all pale in comparison to the ability to be creative in the way of making a child. Bring a child into the world, right? Because the thing is that the David is predictable. Mona Lisa is boring compared to the human soul, the human mind, the human body. Is that you're gonna, and it's kind of funny. I always bring up Alex O'Connor in here for some reason. I was watching his podcast the other day, and
he'll watch our podcast.
He'll watch our podcast one day. I'm bringing him up enough, but he was talking about just a very cliche idea of like in philosophy. He was comparing some people that like kind of nitpick certain aspects of philosophy as you don't study the molecules of paint that make up the Mona Lisa, right? But he's got a point there, is that there is kind of a finality, right? A finite nature to creative works that people have made that does not have that finite nature in an infinite being like a child, right? Is that I always think like microscopes. Microscopes are a great example of this. Is if you, you always make fun of me when I zoom in the pictures I can't zoom.
It's a very grandpa thing to do.
Right, but what happens is that no matter how much you zoom, you're going to get to a point where you can't zoom anymore. And then you can bring the screen closer and closer and closer to your face. But what will happen is that like the image that you're seeing will pixelate. And you'll realize that it's just made up of a bunch of lights that are either on or off. Right? Is that when you take a microscope, that's like a child, right? Is that you start zooming in on a leaf, and I mean, depending on how great your microscope is, I mean, mine aren't that great, but you can keep zooming in. But let's say at the most powerful microscope God could ever create, is that you would never stop zooming in. Like never. Like you would kind of, I could just imagine like the leaf, and then you see the tissues, and then the cells and the organelles, and then all of a sudden you're seeing like lipids, and you're seeing like hydrocarbons, and then zooming into the carbon molecule, and there's 6 protons, and right, and you keep going in, and then the protons are made of quarks, and you're getting closer and closer and closer. That's what a child is as far as creativity. And you're not truly creating, right? Like you're not ultimately creating until you've given up your boyhood as a man, right? And as a woman, you're giving up your girlhood, right? Until you truly endeavor in that sacrifice of freedom to start a family. And I mean, I think that's the reason why he's bringing this up. Right? Because I mean,
or to just like give your life to somebody, because like obviously there are plenty of people who like I don't know, either don't end up starting a family or like never made it to that point in their life that they could start a family. But like to love somebody in a full unconditional way that is creative and outside of any other relationship that you've ever experienced, like I think that's going outside of your childhood, and like, because in like when you're a child, like you're just taken care of, as
Mm-hmm.
you should be. Like, you should be taken care of, and you should depend on your parents and the adults around you. But yeah, eventually you do have to leave that and realize, like, I need to take care of people,
Yeah.
and people's like people can depend on me too.
Yeah.
And like I can start to make my own choices, because yeah, like, children, like, they obviously they have free will too, but um it's a little harder for them to make the right decisions because
Well,
they just don't
their
know.
free will is it's like of a different nature, especially like very little children.
Yeah.
You know, is it's I can't think of any other word other than like heaven like.
Yeah. And you know what? I I've heard parents say this all the time, and usually when they say, I'm like, okay. But they'll always tell me, like, that their children, even as babies, like, had their own personality and their own, like, temperament.
Mm-hmm.
And I I'm starting to notice that I can sometimes lean a little too much, like, scientific, like, but why, like what happened to them, what factors
Sure.
in their life were, like, nurtured or by nature, like, that they are like this.
Mm-hmm.
But it really takes away from the fact that God did give them a soul, like a unique soul.
Right.
And obviously, like, nurture and nature have, like, so many things, like, there are so many factors
Mm.
that can determine somebody's personality. But, like, also just God himself determines their personality. And then their own choice, the free will given to them by God, determines their personality.
Right. I've heard this is a very like I guess like neuroscientific way of looking at personality. But personality described as a set of strategies for um, being able to manage threats and I guess um, anything positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to take in things positive and warn off threats. It's a management strategy, right? And you might go like, that's very deterministic. You know, you might go like, oh, why does this person have? I've heard this about like they'll talk about uh, maybe this sounds a little callous, but overweight men,
Mm-hmm.
and they are usually very jolly, a Santa Claus kind of figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's two ways looking at that. Is it that tends towards those people tend towards being jolly, or are they jolly because maybe that's a coping mechanism because they weren't as well welcomed when they
Mm-hmm.
were younger,
Mm-hmm.
so they took on a bit more of a jollier, oh, he's a lovable guy kind of,
Yeah.
and it's a reaction to trauma that happened earlier on in life. And you might go, that could be deterministic, or that could be the cross that
Mm-hmm.
God's asking one to bear. Is that what type of personality you start to develop might reflect the cross that God's asking you to bear. Because you see someone that's had a trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and you might go, why did that happen to them? Or you can go, that's where meaning is found in your suffering,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think a lot of the saints have discovered that,
Mm-hmm.
is that, and that's something that people do not like to hear. They're like, I just want to rid myself of all my suffering. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you're suffering because it's God's will,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you have a particularly adapted personality trait to manage that particular type of suffering. And you could look at your personality as a negative thing. A lot of people don't like their personalities. And you have to look at it as it's a set of strategies of the suffering you've taken on.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably means that you're adapted to, and that's why you want to make sure that you, I think, listen to the Holy Spirit and do everything to make sure that your mental health stays. I think you have an obligation
Mm-hmm.
to to work on your mental health in that way, because your personality should be something that is an adapted strategy to take on suffering, to take on a cross.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I've never heard anyone say that most people don't like their personalities.
I didn't say most people don't like their personalities. It's just some people don't like their personalities.
But I kind of think it's accurate, though.
Yeah, it could be most people don't like. I'm sure most people don't like at least a part of their personality.
Oh, for sure. I'm sure all people don't like a part of their
personality.
Right? But it is kind of startling how many people don't like themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And not just like the things that they do, but like who they feel like they are. Like, this is my personality. And I'm like a little bit, I'm getting sad thinking about it, actually. But
I think that's something to reflect on in prayer.
Yeah.
Is there a pretty dominant part of your personality that doesn't seem to be going anywhere? That doesn't seem to be pathological. If it's pathological, maybe that's not this type of prayer, right? But I could definitely see some meditative prayer on an aspect of your personality that is pretty predominant, that maybe puts you in situations where you're supposed to do something, you know, where you're the person to do something because you have a piece of a set of data, you know, some knowledge, some information that can help you navigate. And that kind of goes back to, oh man, I'm just right on these pages here with this, but the whole idea of, if a man endeavors to establish and extend the power and dominion of the human race itself over the universe, his ambition is without doubt both a more wholesome and more noble thing than the other two. That couldn't have been more perfect segue into that right there. Is how does your personality change the world? Right? God gave you a personality to change the world, you know? And I think most people hide their gifts under a bushel basket, not because, I mean, plenty of it is because of fear, but a lot of it's because you don't realize some things are gifts.
I was going to say, and I think people don't know that they have certain gifts.
Yes.
Like, I'm a very big proponent of people doing things outside of their personality, because I think, and really going outside of your comfort zone. And I say this because when like my senior year of college, I picked up a lot of like random jobs because it was like right during COVID. So I just started, I was working at a coffee shop and I was working at a nursing home. And then and then I started working in youth ministry, and I was working those 3 jobs, and none of them were jobs that I would have just chosen for myself. They kind of just happened, but all of them were jobs that made me aware of certain gifts that I had that I didn't know, certain weaknesses that I have that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And just brought me outside of this personality that going back to the putting ourselves in box, like, I thought I was this person, and now being in these different situations, I realized that I'm so much more complex than I realized. And I think God puts us in situations that develop our personality and can help us in further situations that continue to develop our personality.
Do you know what I saw literally when you're explaining this right here?
What?
I saw this image of a garden, right? And especially the basil plants. I'm not sure why, really particularly the basil plants, because you remember when we first planted those basil plants?
Yeah.
What was it, a month that they were just 2 leaves?
They were so little.
They were so little for months, right? And it's so interesting is when you look at someone's personality, you got to think it's like imagine a bunch of those little basil plants all in different scattered spots, right? And you only have a finite amount of sunlight, water, and nutrients, right? And you can see which ones are starting to grow a little bit more. And those are different aspects of your personality,
Yeah.
right? And what happens is that with basil plants particularly, is that once they get their secondary leaves going and you get that first one that it starts growing really fast and it starts to grow exponentially, right? And it goes from a month at 2 leaves to maybe it's spent 3 days with the 2 new leaves coming and all of a sudden it's got 15 leaves a week later. And if you think about it, is what parts of your personality do you water? What parts of your personality do you let see the sunlight? And it's almost like when you take on another job, a job that's outside the box, maybe you water some of those plants that you didn't think were going to grow.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they're growing better than the plants that look like they're already growing pretty well.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you only water the ones that look like they're going to grow really well, maybe they're only going to grow to so much. But when you start to take something out of the box, you go someplace and you go outside your personality, and all of a sudden you start watering aspects of your personality that you didn't really put much effort towards,
Right.
and now they become necessary.
Right.
They start to flourish, and you all of a sudden realize this kind of person you became is so much more vibrant and full of creativity now that you would have never knew that those basil plants would have grown up.
Right. Yeah. That's a good analogy.
I don't know.
It.
When I tell you that when you were saying that, that's the only thing I saw in my head. It's just because it's
Little
true.
basil leaves. Yeah.
And I think that's I think God puts plants on the earth so that we can see how reality works sometimes.
Oh, for sure. I think God is wildly creative, obviously, but also like he has one way of creating, and it's love. Okay, he has one way of creating, and you can see it in all of his creation. Like it all follows a rhythm, and it is something harmonious and something mysterious. But I think you know God when you see him. And sometimes we react differently because sometimes it's we're seeing God when we don't want to see him. And we know what's going to happen next, but like he is something familiar to us. And I think we learn about ourselves by learning about creation.
Yeah.
Because like we were created in the same way.
Yeah. You know what I find so interesting about what you were saying, God, God's creation when you see it, right? Is something that I recently realized about reality is how the idea of heaven, the idea of perfection, and we've talked about the idea of perfection and how there's this like rationalistic way of looking at perfection as a bad thing, right? Like, where do you go from here? Does anything else happen after perfect? But you've kind of changed my mind on how I look on that. Is what I've noticed about reality is that perfection is more particular than it seems to be. Because in my mind, perfection seems like blank slate. No imperfection at all. It's just blank slate, nothing there, right? And the thing is, it's kind of like don't even touch it. because you'll immediately make it less perfect, right? And if you look at God's creation, it's anything but that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it's crazy to think that God made this world for us and yet made these crazy exoplanets that are out there that apparently have the most crazy features on it that I'm sure if you went to one and stood on one for 1 second, you would be just blown away with awe.
Yeah.
You know? And like, he created all of that. And it's crazy how, when you see how small we are on this planet, in this solar system, in this galaxy, amongst billions of galaxies, but that he created something so particular. You know, like, oh my goodness, like to think of like looking at a leaf under a microscope, how crazy that is, and to imagine that there is that much complexity everywhere.
Right.
And it's so particular, and it's not a blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
And that his creations, they are perfect, but it's not something that you have to feel like you have to shy away from interacting with.
Right.
Yeah. The more particular it is, the more that you feel a part of his creation, the more you want to act with it.
Yeah.
And if it was something that was like a porcelain doll that you weren't allowed to touch, like, it's not like that. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that like you have really helped me to understand, is because my idea of heaven growing up, when I was a kid, heaven seemed like hell. Mm-hmm. When people said like, "Oh, it's perfect," I'm like, "That sounds terrible. That means I'm not allowed to touch anything. I got the heaven."
A nice little museum.
Right. Heaven seemed like a China store that my parents would take me to, and they would be like, "Don't you dare touch anything." Mm-hmm. Right. And that's what heaven felt like to me. And it's not. Heaven's something to interact with. Earth is something to interact with. Mm-hmm. You know, and to make it more perfect, like heaven.
Yeah. And I think that completely changes our understanding of when Jesus says, like, you should be perfect like my Father is mm-hmm. perfect. Because I think, I don't know why people pretend that verse doesn't exist. Yeah. And they'll say things like, oh, but like Jesus was perfect, but like we're
like, we're not supposed to be.
Yeah, we're not supposed to.
It's okay. You got to pass because you're just human.
Exactly. Humans are imperfect. Like, to err is to human, or whatever.
Yep.
I don't know. And I think the reality is, one, obviously it's hard to be perfect the way that God is perfect. Because he is God and divine and all those things. But I think also we don't have a good understanding of what perfection is. And our understanding of perfection is something we're scared of. And so I think we do shy away from it, not just because it's hard, but because our idea of it isn't actually something we want. And because even like I've heard so many women say that they have a really hard time having a relationship with Mary because she was perfect. Mm-hmm. And because their understanding of perfect is that she is like gentle and calm and peaceful all the time. And it's not that they can't be that, but they don't want to be that. Because the reality is we're not called to be that. Like, you can't expect
You're worried of disturbing her peace.
Exactly.
And I think that kind of comes along with that Jacques Baptiste. I said his name right? Father Jacques Baptiste? Nope.
Jacques?
No. It's so confusing because Philippe, because I'm thinking Baptiste Lamarck, right? I always get those two confused.
All those French names.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Oh, it's embarrassing.
No, it's okay. You'll get it right someday.
But his book, Jacques Philippe, his book about finding and maintaining peace is, it's so easy to look at Mary and go, I couldn't interact with her.
Yeah.
My presence alone, I got to say something after this, but my presence alone looks like it's going to just degrade or do something wrong to her peace. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that when you're perfect in peace, things can't disrupt your peace.
Mm-hmm.
And now, do you remember the painting I made you?
Which one?
Of the dream I had.
Yes.
That was the most profound dream I've ever had. It was the most vivid dream I've ever had, and it was the single most influential dream on how I acted going forth. And the dream was where I was in this really like technologically advanced factory, and it was very like everything was chrome type of thing, right? And I was in an elevator going up, and what looked like we were getting up to like a higher floor, but we were underground. And I'm not sure who I was with because I was with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and they were walking with me, right? And they were riding the elevator up, but then they didn't come out of the elevator. And when the elevator opened, I get to chills just thinking about this. I was in this field of yellow and green, and I don't know why. I remember thinking in the dream itself, thinking it was a very lucid dream. Everything is so perfect here. It was a beautiful field. It was the imagery I got while reading Anna Karenina
Mm-hmm.
of when Levin is like out in the fields and he's kind of with all of the workers out there. Um, and that's everyone's like least favorite part of that book, which is kind of funny. It's my favorite part, but it was exact imagery of where it was just the most peaceful field. And I looked to the left very specifically. I remember I was on a path and I looked to the left, and there were these creatures doesn't feel right, but there were these beings, and I just knew they were angels. I have no clue why. They were made of stone though, and they just had the most peaceful faces.
Hmm.
And I remember feeling like I had to leave this place because I wasn't worthy of even being in their presence, right? And it was such a strong feeling of like, please don't even look at me because I don't even feel like I deserve to be looked at by you, you know? And that's that kind of perfection that like is that self insecurity
Mm-hmm.
of and kind of what we were talking about is like you've sinned and you feel unworthy of heaven, right? And everyone like this is a common thing that priest will say in a funeral of
Mm-hmm.
like that you pray that the person chooses heaven, right? And that's weird because I think everybody just wants to go to heaven. But could you imagine like if you've sinned and you had just this unworthy nature that you feel like you have, and you get exposed to something so beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
and you go, oh, I don't want to go in here. Not
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want to, but because I'm gonna, I feel like I'll tarnish this place,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the motivation to do God's will is to have the courage to choose heaven.
Yeah, and I think for it to be something familiar.
Right. For yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because I think the more that you interact with God here on earth, the more you get to experience heaven here.
Mm-hmm.
And so that will be an easier yes when you're faced with. Because this makes me think of the book by C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all these different characters who are really like choosing whether they're going to go to heaven or not. And a lot of them don't choose it because it's either because they're not seeing something
Mm-hmm.
or because they just can't move past whatever decision it is they have to make or let go of to make it to heaven. And it makes me think a lot about like my own motivations, and going back to page 39 that you were reading, and that quote at the end, it says, if a man endeavor to establish and extend the power and dominion of the human race itself over the universe, his ambition is without doubt both a more wholesome and more noble thing. I was reminded of a conversation I had with my pastor at the parish I work at, like probably near when I started. And for some reason, we started talking about like my kind of the intentions of like why I'm doing youth ministry and why my job is so important. And I felt very certain that it was not because I love the company that I work for, and it's not because I love the church that I'm at, although both were true. But it was really like if God wanted me to work at a different church, if he wanted to be on a different mission with a different group of people in a different state, in a different country, like it wouldn't matter. Like I don't feel, and this is the gift of being taken out of your home and being away from your family, is you feel such a detachment from your loyalties to anything here on earth.
Yes.
And not to say like we should be loyal to our friends and our family, and we should like, patriotism is not a bad thing, but ultimately our intention should be to glorify God. And if we're attached to too many things here on earth, or just attached too much to it, that it starts to prioritize our desire for heaven, then we start to make the wrong choices that ultimately will lead to the wrong choice.
It's funny when you say that whole idea of the detachment, is that you should be willing to detach, right? And there's a lot of titles that people have that they should be willing to detach, right? And somebody once said this, it was a very interesting way of putting this, which he said that he was a Catholic Christian, or no, he's a Christian Catholic American. And in that order, right? Is that I'm a Christian first, then I'm a Catholic, then I'm an American. Because nothing about being American should ever come in the way of you being a Catholic. And then, this is controversial, but nothing about you being Catholic should ever come in the way of you being Christian. And I think that's something the Catholic Church is continuously working on, is to make it possible for people to live out a Christian faith through the lens of Catholicism. And it's not perfect, but I do think that it is a work in progress, right?
Yeah. But you do see how people have a really hard time with that.
Yes.
And even on a smaller scale, like people so much identify with their home parish or their particular mission or their community.
Are they willing to give that up?
Yeah. Like for God, for the Christian faith.
Yep. Yeah, because like you are a parishioner of St. Francis Cathedral, right? And maybe you see this a lot, and I'm not going to name the parish, but you see this a lot in a parish that I was associated with, and you see people that they feel this sense of importance within the parish.
Yeah.
And in order to maintain their sense of importance within the parish, they will do things that are un-Catholic, un-Christian, just generally not a God-fearing type of person would do these types of things. And it's just very evident that the hierarchy of God being at the top is just not evident there, because that's what Jesus says, is that you should be able to lose your life. Whoever loses their life will gain it, right, in heaven, right? And I mean, it's a weird thing to pray about, just to ask for the courage of, if you if God wants me to lose my life, like what that means.
Yeah.
And to have the courage to choose to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
If it comes between God and your life.
Yeah. This is gonna sound silly, but I prayed about that maybe a year ago. I was praying about like what are the things that I'm attached to, just like a good check-in. Like what do I need to detach myself from a little bit? And to be honest, like maybe you see this a little bit. I'm trying to be better about it, but I do have a strange attachment to my dog.
Oh, do you?
Just in that, like, when I'm not with her, if I'm not thinking about her, I'm fine. Sometimes when I'm not with her and I think about her, it's easy for me to lose my peace because it's very easy for me to imagine that she's not at peace.
I was gonna say, do you think she has the same thoughts?
She's a dog.
She is not at peace when you're not there. Trust me.
But I think I felt it was really good for me to pray that prayer and to let myself recognize that because this was back a couple years ago, actually. Yeah, this was 2 summers ago when I was in Portugal, and I was trying to like offer God, I don't know, everything that I had. And my attachment to my dog, I think it sounds so silly to like give that to God.
Mm-hmm.
But
it doesn't. It makes perfect sense.
I mean, it was something important to me. And I think also like it's really easy for us to believe the lies that the trivial things in our life don't matter to God. And I think it's dangerous because one, then the trivial things can easily start to become priorities and we don't even realize it. Yeah.
Right?
And I think vice versa, sometimes then we also don't pray about trivial things because like I think to pray like I don't know, for a kid to pray to God like I would love a puppy, like God get me a puppy, like I mean maybe he won't answer it, but also like I think God would love to hear that prayer, like he wants to hear those kinds of things. So I think like finding that balance of like God, I I want these things, but and I'm going to let you know because I would like to receive them as a gift from you and recognize them as a gift from you and recognize that you give them to me to glorify you in however that makes sense.
It's funny that you say when a kid prays for a puppy.
Yeah.
Because this reminds me of something that I read in the Introduction to the Devout Life from St. Francis de Sales, right? He was talking about kind of exactly what you're talking about, trivial things, trivial decisions, right? And the whole idea is that you don't have to pray for discernment on what tie you're going to wear this morning, right? But to acknowledge that preference and what you want, right, has deep ties to something that God's calling you to.
Yeah.
Right? And that though you don't have to like go into some deep meditation on every little decision, but to see that every little decision is a reflection of God's will for you, right? And it's an opportunity for you to bring about God's will. And if you think about trace back the I want a puppy, especially for, let's take a boy, right? Is that a puppy is sometimes another bar on the ladder towards manhood.
Yeah.
You know, is that obviously there's the fun things about having a puppy, right? But you almost think is that like, what does that evoke in you? You know, because puppies are, you know, we've bred them to look, they call it neoteny, right, is that like dogs maintain their like puppy-like features longer. I mean, people always confuse Fendi for a puppy, right? That's neoteny, right? Is that just that's puppy-like features in an adult dog, right? Is that I mean, what's interesting, this is something you see all the time in apes, is that people they go like a baby orangutan, baby chimpanzee looks so unbelievably human-like.
Yeah.
And then you see them grow up, and the orangutan has giant flanges on their face, and you go, that don't look like a human no more, right? But when they're a baby, they look so human-like. Is that humans have kind of bred themselves to maintain childlike features into adulthood, right? And if you think about it, is that it's so we nurture each other, right? And when you ask the child, and you could probably prod this out of them, of like why they want a puppy, why are they asking God for a puppy? They have this desire to nurture, right? And they see the puppy as a practice for having a child, right? Whether they know it or not, right? Is that the puppy isn't what they want. The puppy is a means to what they want, right? And it's kind of funny is that it almost seems like it's a very cliche thing for a child to want, but for a reason, because it does seem to have that significant meaning behind it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good place to stop on this Christmas in July.
I wrote so many more things.
I know, me too. And you know what? I'm sure it will come up in the next 600 pages.
Oh, we're already that far in. Wow. Yes. Well, it's good to get all those thoughts about gardening out.
Right.
They're all festering up in there in my head, I'm telling you. And I got my anger out about the groundhogs.
Yeah.
I don't think I did, actually. That's the tip of the iceberg about the groundhogs. Trust me, those maybe God just like.
Yeah, I got over my rabbit anger.
Yeah.
Eating my strawberries, so you have a free will.
These vegetarian animals. All right, well, thank you for joining us. Next time when we read, we will start up on Kant's anti-Trinitarian personalism. So
more philosophy.
We may have a special guest next time.
True.
So you got that to look forward to.
Stay tuned.
All right. Let's cheers on out of here.
I didn't drink any of my tea.
No, you didn't.